All right, everyone, welcome back. Hope you had a great weekend. My weekend was tiring. I spent most of my weekend, a lot of my weekend, at least the evenings, playing Humankind until late into the night, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And then kind of 1 o'clock again or something like that. Just a lot of time. I'm so tired. But I got some decent sleep last night. I'm awake. And I also didn't take that anti-anxiety medicine last night for my brain, my head issue, which I don't seem to be having any of that problem right now, which is kind of good. So hopefully kind of figured out what is going on with that. Like I had said previously, it most likely is because I hadn't been taking care of myself through the pandemic, haven't been going to the chiropractor specifically. My posture was a mess, my body was a mess, so we go into the chiropractor a lot, and it looks like that there's tension here in my temples, which put pressure on a nerve, went from here all the way up, and which was creating the problem. So I don't know, wish me luck. This is the first day. I didn't take the medications. Hopefully I'll be doing okay from here on out, but I don't know, we shall see. How was everyone else's weekend? Did you guys do anything of interest at all? Yeah, all I did was play, and that's pretty much it. Anybody? Nothing? All right. I did make an update to my policy here, and we're going to go over this video here in a little while. I added this, I found this video. Found this one first, the short worst case. It's kind of a 20-minute video, which is a summary of this 50-minute video. It's, yikes. You know, as much as I thought we were screwed before, it's even even worse now with this. So we'll go over this. So I updated my policies there. I did a little bit of cleanup on policies today too, but nothing really that big. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the first thing we're going to cover here. All right, let me hold on, this is what's I gonna do here? Here we go. Yeah, the whole morning has been all about AOC's tax the rich dress. So I've been I'm a bit conflicted about AOC in general. I mean, I was a huge fan of hers. Yeah, on my blogs about me, I love AOC with all my progressive feels here, right? But that's kind of changing. As we see more, or actually less and less of stuff getting done and that sort of thing. But that's neither here nor there. But let's take a look at this. This is so she has this dress that she's wearing here. This is for the gala. A benefit gala for the Met, which is a museum, the Metropolitan Museum, I think, in New York City. And lots of people there, politicians, famous people. It's like a $35,000 a ticket event. And she's there. People are freaking out about it. I mean, swear to God, that's all that was on Twitter this morning. That's all there was. Just this. And it was like, wow. So here's some of the story behind this, right? So the dress was given to her by a designer who was from Brooklyn. She's actually, I guess, an immigrant who came to Brooklyn, started from nothing, and created her own design label, and who is one of AOC's constituents. And this designer was also invited to submit dresses or submit stuff for the gala itself. So it's kind of a neat story there. Immigrant makes her dreams big and is able to have a nice fashion line of her own and submits a dress to the gala. And not only that, but her representative is wearing it at the wearing it to a famous event as well. So that's kind of cool. Wasn't purchased or anything. From what I've read, it was just given to AOC because, you know, to wear to this event, especially because of the the customization here. Okay, so there's that, and there's also the idea that the event is $35,000 a fucking ticket, right? That's insane. So she was also given a ticket. I think by virtue of the fact that all New York representatives are invited and are given free tickets to come to this. I think that's the way it works. Or she was given one for free by someone for, you know, whatever. So there's that. Now, we have this dress, Tax the Rich, and some people are freaking out about this. You know, just, well, because many see this as performative, you know, standard neoliberal democratic performative theater here, the Tax the Rich thing, much like the kente cloth. Now, I don't quite see it as that bad. This is, at least she's here amongst the rich, and she's wearing Tax the Rich dress, which is something. So I've been a bit conflicted about this idea in general. Well, about her in general, you know, because we get about the forced vote issue. I pretty much fell along that lines. The squad, AOC, and, you know, everyone who's become a part of the quote honorary squad didn't force the vote on this and that and the other thing. So I'm conflicted about this. Now, what I was saying to myself as a part of this as well is that, you know, people wouldn't be talking about this quite as much. They still would be because it's AOC and she's polarizing and all that. But also, if there was a protest outside that she was fronting for here, I think we'd be having a much different conversation around this, because it isn't just, you know, her wearing a rich dress inside this $35,000 plate event, right? Just hobnobbing with the rich people, just another neoliberal shill, right? But then she would be there as fronting for some protest outside. So it's really an extension of her it would have been an extension of her activist work, right? But that's not what has necessarily happened. Now, so there's all that controversy. But I did just recently find out, like right before I went on stream, that there was a protest outside. And no one was talking about that. So I was like, this should be kind of the story. Unfortunately, AOC wasn't in contact with them, or they weren't in contact with her, so that they could, you know, cooperate on this and make sure Black Lives Matter movement has maximum exposure. Her dress could have said Black Lives Matter on it instead of Tax the Rich. Although, of course, Tax the Rich is a super important statement, especially when you're around a lot of rich people. So this is kind of a missed opportunity, either on the BLM movement here locally to contact her and let her know, or whatever. Maybe the dress was already made before all this happened. I don't know. But we'll go and read this. So at least there's more to the story than just AOC's dress and all that. So there was an actual protest, BLM protest outside of it. So let's go ahead and read about this so we can figure out what what was actually going on outside that really matters, that we can actually, you know, it's newsworthy. Actually, I'll go ahead and share. Here's the dress. Here's the article on the protest that was happening outside. Right? So, outside the Met Gala, police arrested multiple Black Lives Matter protesters. Protesters staged a demonstration to defund the police outside the fashion event attended by Mayor Bill de Blasio. Now, yeah, defund the police. That is what her dress should have said, since that is the focus of what the protest is. All right, see a lady here getting arrested. All right, so the gala was on Monday. Inside the Met Gala on Monday evening, New York City Mayor de Blasio walked the red carpet alongside First Lady Chirlane McCray and son Dante, seemingly enjoying the highly exclusive event despite once deeming it not his cup of tea. Outside the gala, NYPD officers arrested multiple Black Lives Matter protesters who were calling to defund the police department, whose budget de Blasio oversees. Ah, okay. According to the Daily Mail, a flyer for the demonstration identified the protesters as an autonomous group of NYC abolitionists who believe that policing does not protect and serve communities, and hashtags on Twitter identified them as Fire Them All protesters. Okay. Cell phone footage shows the crowd gathered outside the gala chanting Black Lives Matter and calling out Mike Rosado, the name of the 24-year-old man in the Bronx who was fatally shot by plainclothes police officers in August. Oh, okay. That's horrible. Additional footage and photos of the demonstration show at least 24 police officers rushing toward the crowd, tackling people to the ground and carrying them away in zip-tie handcuffs. Later that night, protesters reportedly moved their demonstration to outside NYPD's 28th precinct. Okay, where some of their fellow demonstrators were still being detained as of around 9 p.m. local time. Okay. Yeah, so definitely disconnect. They were at the Met protesting, then they went to the precinct, which makes sense considering what they were protesting. Abolish the police and that sort of a thing. Yeah, it was a missed opportunity from AOC and the some of the activist organizations and Sunrise Movement and stuff like that. Yeah, she really should have coordinated with her, or AOC should have coordinated with them to really have the have her dress have the maximum effect. There would have been a very different conversation on her dress had she kind of done that. All right. Earlier today, the NYPD's Strategic Response Group arrested protesters outside the Met Gala. Protesters are calling for police accountability and divestment from the NYPD. They're met with violence from unmasked SRG cops. We'll watch a little bit.
This is the New York City.
And they started arresting him. Yep. De Blasio was heavily criticized last summer amid mass protests for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor for implementing a citywide 8 p.m. curfew that exacerbated police violence against demonstrators. The outgoing mayor was also notably defended the NYPD officers who drove into a throng of protesters with an SUV. Okay, that's fucked up. It's inappropriate for protesters to surround a police vehicle and threaten police officers, de Blasio said at the time. Fuck this dude. That's wrong on its face, and that hasn't happened in the history of protest in the NYC. In a way, it is all too fitting that police would be brutally arresting black protesters outside a fashion event whose theme was, in essence, America. The same is true of the fact that the politician who might be able to deliver on protesters' demands would be inside among the city's elite, getting his picture taken. All right. So there you go. That's that story here with AOC, her dress, and the, shall we say, the BLM protest outside. So yeah, it's a missed opportunity on her part. And again, we're back to some more police brutality and arresting of people, which is just ridiculous. All right. Let's move on from that. So, here's the video. All right. Let me pull this up. I saw this video today, and it is pretty damning. If, I'm doomer here, right? That's what I do. And this video just really goes through and hits a bunch of... Oh, I shouldn't have shared it there. Hold on. Goes through kind of the... come on, get up here. The indicators for how the climate change is going, carbon dioxide, all that sort of stuff, and kind of tells us how good or bad we're doing in this case. We're pretty much hitting all of it super, mega, ultra bad. So we're going to watch this. Got captions on here, and then you can kind of see what we're talking about here. This is Peter Carter. He created this. Actually, let me Let me actually go ahead and bring this up here. I brought this up earlier, right, on my policies. I'll go ahead and share this here. That he made this video shorter. This is a 20-minute video, and then the longer one is 50 minutes. I have not watched the longer one yet, but I have watched the 20-minute one. And that's the one we are going to watch right here. And did I share? I did. Okay. All right, let's do this. This is Peter Carter, Climate Emergency Institute. And yeah, here we go. That volume up.
Hello, I'm Peter Carter. This is a video for the Climate Emergency Institute. It's September 2021. This is a brief version of a long video
Let me know if you can hear it okay.
that I just did recently. And the title is, How Fast is the Climate Being Changed? Could climate change today be tracking the worst case scenario? So the study is a comprehensive study of global climate change indicators, and that is, they are the direct causes and direct effects of atmospheric greenhouse gas pollution caused by greenhouse gas emissions. This is the list of global climate change indicators, and the summary of the finding is that these climate change indicators are at record, that is, adverse highs. They are all increasing faster than ever, and they are on the worst case scenario. So a very important report was published by the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, in September of 2019, and this was 5 years of global climate change. And the headline for this report was Global Climate in 2015 to 2019, Climate Change Accelerates. Here are 2 images from that report, the global surface temperature increase obviously accelerating, and there the map of the global surface temperature increase with the regional increases. The focus on this video is the worst case scenario, and it is the worst case RCP 8.5 scenario. That's what this worst case is called, and these are RCP scenarios. They're global radiative heat forcing, going from best case projection to worst case projection. The diagram that you see in front of you is the global climate change indicator of global warming, global average surface temperature increase. I've chosen this one because it shows both degrees C and degrees F, and it is from pre-industrial. This one is the one we're interested in. That's RCP 8.5, the worst case, and that heats up fastest and more than any of the other scenarios. And one at the bottom here is the best case scenario, which is called RCP 2.6. First paper published in 2020, we have this cumulative CO2 emissions, and the title of the paper, RCP 8.5 tracks cumulative CO2 emissions, and the abstract said not only are the emissions consistent with the RCP 8.5, RCP 8.5, the very worst case scenario, is also the best match out to mid-century under current and stated policies, and this shows the accelerating cumulative.
Yeah, and I want to mention, and I didn't catch this the first time we went through, that this is looking at 8.5, I think it's 8.5 degree rise by 2100, so in the next 80 years, I think that's the way this is working. But I'm going to listen a little bit closer, take a look at this, and I think that's the way it is. I mean, yikes.
CO2 emissions, that's cumulative fossil fuel CO2 emissions, and that is the latest update of August 2021 from the Scripps Institute. We started off our greenhouse gas indicator exercise with emissions, with global greenhouse gas emissions as the CO2 equivalent, and CO2 equivalent accounts for methane and nitrous oxide as well as carbon dioxide. And we found that the CO2 equivalent is accelerating, tracking the worst case scenario. Here is how we put this together. We used the trends in global CO2 and total greenhouse gas emissions, the 2020 report from the Netherlands Environmental Agency. And we used this paper to check the RCP 8.5 worst case emissions. And the result is that it's actually tracking above the worst case scenario. Next, atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations, and again the CO2 equivalent. That's accelerating and tracking the worst case scenario. For that, we took the atmospheric CO2 equivalent from NOAA's annual greenhouse gas index, and the last one was 504 parts per million of CO2 equivalent. And to get the RCP 8.5 worst case, we used the EPA and checked them together here, showing that atmospheric CO2 equivalent is clearly accelerating, it's soaring, and is tracking the very highest worst case RCP 8.5 scenario. Next, we have radiative heat forcing, and our result on that was a rapid sustain.
Hey, Weird Man, how you doing? Happy Tuesday. How was your weekend? 20 years of 9/11? Yeah? Yes? 2001. Yes. 20 years. Yes. Yes. Advanced math. Yep. I did 9/11 on Saturday. We watched the I think you were there, weren't you? The Zeitgeist Movement's section on that. Then I read War is a Racket by Smedley Butler from 1933-35, somewhere around there. Yeah, it's been, use imperialism. That's where the money's at, right? Right now I'm watching a video here. This is going through the worst case climate change indicators and just showing how we are on track currently for the worst possible case for climate change. Like, I think they're saying RCP 8.5, so I think it's like 8.5 degree increase or something like that. I'm not sure though. I'm trying to pay attention to this to see if that is what 8.5 means. Hold on, let me check, because that would just be horrific. There you go. What is RCP? Concentration of carbon that delivers global warming at an average of 8.5 watts per square meter. It's not about temperature rise. Okay. Okay, so RCP 2.6 would give us 1.8 degrees Celsius by 2100. So 8.5. So it's almost like half. So it's almost like a 4 degree rise, I think. I think that's how that math works out. So I was in the car dealerships of the city, and how sad it is. Oh, why is it sad? Because of the cars, or the lack of quality of cars, or what? There's a lot to be sad about. Yeah, I was up, for the last 3 nights playing Humankind until like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So tired. I didn't play too long last night. I was in bed by a little after 10. I didn't take my medication for my head, so I'm still feeling pretty okay. So probably is the chiropractic problem of the tension in my brain, tension in my temple right here, causing to put pressure on the nerve that goes up here. I'm feeling pretty good so far. We'll see how the rest of the week goes, though. Hopefully, I'll be just fine with that. All right, I'll keep on going here while you're typing.
Sustained increase and tracking the worst case scenario. We obtained the radiative forcing again from the NOAA Annual Greenhouse Gas Index at 3.18 wilms per square meter. For the RCP 8.5 radiative forcing, we used the Van Vuren paper, and this was the original reference paper for the IPCC's last assessment in 2014, and it's tracking the worst case RCP 8.5 scenario. So next we come to the global average surface temperature increase, or global warming. That is accelerating and tracking the worst case scenario we found. We use the WMO last state of the climate for the most recent annual global warming of 1.2 degrees C of 2020. For the worst case RCP 8.5 global warming, we use the IPCC's 2014 fifth assessment.
Okay, so yeah, you see here it's about 4.6 degrees, if this is right. So this is only 480, so it isn't too sharp. Yeah, this is degrees Celsius, and by 2100, we're looking at just over 4 degrees, 4.5 degrees. Shame for the country. Our Russian cars are disgusting, and they never changes for the better. I was thinking about to buy a car, a Lada. Yeah, I've heard from my wife about Ladas, or you has, and have not heard about them. As a result, I will not buy it under any circumstances. Fuck that. Even Chinese car, oh my God, exactly. It's just a copy paste of popular cars, but Chery and Geely, and at least try to do cars what exactly looks like normal cars, really, for people. Yeah, from what I remember from Ladas, they're really square. They have a very blocky, square look to them. I'll go and bring one up here so people can kind of see what we're talking about. Lada car. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, just blocky and square. Oh, this is kind of neat. Very, very iconic Russian brand. Yeah, like Japan and America have the market pretty much cornered on cars. I mean, Korea, right? Yeah, they have Kia, right? And then we have a Nissan, and we have a Hyundai. Hyundai's Korean, so they're getting into the market too. Yeah, it's Russia hasn't done a whole lot for that. China's starting to get into the market too, isn't she? Isn't there a Chinese company out there with a car? I don't think it's not in the U.S. markets, I don't think. But I think there is one. Chinese electric car company. NIO. I've not heard about any of these. But they're out there. They exist. So you're going to buy... German cars are typically what a lot of Russians buy, right? A lot of German. Mercedes-Benz. Have an X-ray model, but it sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, there isn't a whole lot of hope. Not a whole lot of hope. Well, they could do a whole rebrand and actually put effort into it. Like, I would never really consider buying American cars. But prior to the auto bailout here in the United States, I don't know how long ago, Ford was pretty much one of the only American companies that didn't take a bailout, and they were in the process of coming up with an electric hybrid, which the Ford Focus, was it? Was that the Focus? It was the Focus at the time, and they were doing a good job of that. So that's, yeah. I might consider that now. I'd have to really do the research on that. But yeah, pretty much Japanese cars for the most part. Although I do have a Hyundai. Get what I can afford, right? If I had the money, I'd buy a Tesla. But, money. Well, so yeah, what are you going to look at buying? Or try to look at buying? our Hyundai is 2012, I think, and it's needing lots of repairs, unfortunately. So it's in our Hyundai is in the shop right now. Not sure what the problem is yet, but needing to get fixed. Yeah, we have a Hyundai Santa Fe and a Nissan Pathfinder. Nissan's newer. I don't know what year that is, but it's newer. All right, we'll keep going.
And then we compared the two and found the global warming is tracking.
Think about Lada Niva or UAZ Hunter. There's nothing legendary left of these legendary cars. The so-called remasters of 2021 suck so bad. I prefer small cars. So Mini Cooper. Oh, okay. Mini Cooper. My my friend at work, I think that's what he bought too. He bought a Mini as well. He likes those small cars too. Interesting. Interesting. Well, I hope you can find something in your range. That'd be pretty cool. Especially on those small ass European streets. That would a small car makes sense. Good luck.
The worst case scenario, and it's definitely accelerating. This is the global warming index, which is very, very useful. It isolates the global warming from human industrial age emissions only, and on the 15th of December that was 1.21 degrees C, and that clearly accelerating over the recent decade. Note how this also shows,
as you can see here, this is the never mind.
The cumulative atmospheric CO2 emissions, this line in green. Next we come to the oceans. The oceans being 99% of the biosphere's living space. That's by far the largest component of the climate system and the ultimate determinant of the climate. This paper, published in October 2020, is entitled Acceleration of Ocean Warming, Salinification, Deoxygenation, and Acidification in the Surface Subtropical North Atlantic Ocean. That's the waters around Bermuda, and I've added a map in there to show the location of the island of Bermuda. First, with the oceans, we did the ocean heat content. They've taken up just over 90% of the greenhouse gas heat added by emissions. The ocean heat content is the major cause of ocean deoxygenation. We found that ocean heat is accelerating and tracking the worst case scenario. In here I've added the most recent NOAA record of ocean heat, which is clearly accelerating. There is one paper that shows that ocean heat is tracking the worst case scenario. It's a 2020 paper.
Pretty sure that you have at least one just because you live in the US. We are so fucked up in cars, but our public transport, absolutely win-win. Yeah, yeah, we're in a small town. We don't have public transport, which is ridiculous. We have a Hyundai Santa Fe, which is an SUV, and a Nissan Pathfinder, which is also an SUV. We have a daughter, and my wife does yoga, and she takes yoga stuff all over the place, and she also does art, so taking art stuff all over the place as well is so that the SUV is really nice and convenient, especially for shopping and that sort of thing. Yeah, they're a bit older. Maybe my Hyundai is a 2010, and the Pathfinder's I think a 2012. I think. I can't remember, but I would rather have, mass transportation here, especially because I don't really drive that much. Especially during the pandemic, I'm at home all the time. Even when it wasn't the pandemic, I was at home all the time. But it's nice having that second car so we don't have to worry about it. And if we had mass transportation, I wouldn't have to worry about it at all. And that's we talk about that here, right? That this is a failure of urban design and urban planning for that sort of thing. I found that Americans, like Russians, love H cars. Yeah. It's all about the quality. I mean, they make some of the best cars on the market. I haven't really done that much investigation in a long time, but that's my impression. Yeah. Yep. German cars. Or not German cars. Japanese cars. Yummy.
Paper, and the title is Recent Hemispheric Asymmetry in Global Ocean Warming Induced by Climate Change and Internal Variability. Very interesting paper it is, because it shows by far the most ocean heat has been taken up by the southern hemisphere, and relatively very small percentage from the northern hemisphere. Research was on the ocean heat content down to 2,000 meters. The important part of the paper for us was in the supplement. There's the original of the supplement, and here we've just taken the global observed recorded heat content to compare with their RCP 8.5 ocean heat, and you can see that the global heat content is almost up with the worst case RCP 8.5. Next, marine heat waves, a relatively new phenomenon, I gather. They're accelerating and tracking the worst case scenario we found. And here is a paper. Marine heat waves have increased 54% from 1925 to 2016. Longer and more frequent marine heat waves. Here we were able to use the IPCC's special report 2019 on the oceans and the cryosphere. For the rest of the indicators, we've used this report quite a lot. This is on marine heat waves, and this is a multiplication factor going up, and there is the observed recorded marine heat waves obviously accelerating, and a big jump recently tracking the worst case scenario. Now, because this is a multiplication factor, and clearly it's headed in the direction of the worst case scenario, in view of the fact that it's clearly accelerating. Ocean acidification, that's accelerating and tracking the worst case scenario. Ocean acidification is measured by a metric called pH, which is hydrogen ion concentration. The relationship between pH and acidification is inverse. As pH goes down, acidification goes up. We have three sources for ocean acidification. This one is from the Australia Bureau of Meteorology, the state of the climate in 2020, and this is a nice clear image. The original one here on the left shows pH from 1880 to 2020, and as you see, there is an accelerating decline with a great speed up in the rate of decline following 1960. Here on the right, I've just inverted that record to show you the relative acidification. So this shows that the ocean acidification is accelerating rapidly with this big increase in the rate from 1960. There is a scientific report published which is titled Acceleration of Ocean Acidification in the Northwestern Pacific, and this is from the Japan Meteorological Research Institute, which is a very good source for ocean acidification. This is the data illustration from that report, and we are interested in this one, which is the pH. Focusing in on that pH data set, it starts at 1990 and goes to 2019, and this is the rate of pH decline, so it's really declining very fast. I've inverted this to show the rate of acidity. This is a list of data sets from that Japan Meteorological Agency, and this shows the actual pH up to 2020. They show that the pH by 2020 was 8.05 and even less. This is the record that most people will probably be aware of. This is from the NOAA, and this is their latest update of Pacific Ocean pH. Again, the pH is 8.05 by 2.
Honestly, I'm in shock. Chinese Geely Tugela 2020 really looks like a car for people. Overpriced in Russia for a bit, but I can say the car is really good, like medium range Japanese or Korean, and costs approximately $40,000. Jesus. Yeah, oh my God, I've never had a new car. All my cars have been used. Like the most expensive car I've been able to afford was $12,000, and that was the Nissan Pathfinder, which was already, yeah, it was old. It was older when we got it. So yeah, new cars someday maybe, but not very likely. Interesting. Interesting. Wonder if we have any of those Chinese cars here in the U.S. Be interesting to see. Well, let me go ahead and look this up. 'Cause I'm curious to see what this looks like. Oh, okay, that's okay. Sedan. That's buyable. Looks all right. Neat.
(2020). This is the pH here declining, this is the ocean CO2 increasing, and this red is the atmospheric.
I was in a bit of a scary situation. I was once close to buying a Kia at a car dealership, but it was near the Minsk-Moscow highway. I was not an experienced driver, and there is always a fast and huge. Oh yeah. It's if you don't have experience, it can be scary as hell trying to get onto a highway like that. I remember when I was first learning to drive, oh my God, they took us on the highway, and I was shaking when I first did that. Even now, and now I'm not worried about it. I've had enough driving experience that I'm okay with it. We have like right here, you can jump on the interstate to go places, and it's like 75 miles an hour is what our interstate speed limit is. So I'm okay with it. But yeah, it takes a while to get used to it. Quite a while to get used to it. Hope you get there. Hope you get that experience. You don't have to worry about it because it is stressful.
CO2 increasing at an accelerating rate. So I've added the median line here in blue, and you can see the ocean pH is 8.05 or possibly a little less. This is the IPCC record that we have from the fifth assessment in 2014, which we're using for the RCP 8.5 worst case scenario, pH decreasing.
Yeah, there was this one time, this is a long time ago. Long time ago. Still in the Navy. This was probably, let's see, 92, 94, probably 93 or 94. And I had finished my training in the military. I'd come back for vacation, and I had just probably purchased my Ford Mustang, cherry red, 305 small block, and I went with my best friend camping for the weekend while I'm home on vacation for my 2 weeks, and we're on our way home from that camping. We're in my Mustang, and we're driving down the interstate. At that point, yeah, my God, I think the interstate speed limit was 55 or 60 at that time. It was pretty slow comparatively. And yeah, we're going, I think 55, and this car rips by me. I'm pretty sure it was like a two-door Toyota Corolla, blue. Tears by me like I'm standing still. And my best friend and I look at each other like, no. So I floor it. We're following this car in and out of traffic for a half an hour. And my speed limit pegs at like 120. My speedometer pegs there, or 120 or 140. I think it pegs at 140. So my speedometer was pegged, and we were catching up on this guy very slowly. But by the time we even, got anywhere close to him, he had already turned off the interstate, and then we slowed back down to about 85. Yeah, I don't know. It's good 120, 140, something like that on the interstate, weaving in and out of traffic. It was an experience. Oh, to be young and stupid. Those were the days. Yep. Yeah, just that throaty purr of a muscle car like that. It's just such a sexy sound. Well, let me bring a picture of it. 1979 Ford Mustang. And it's because 90 kilometers to 120. Yep. Yeah, it's this one here. It's not the prettiest, but the guy added an aftermarket kind of blower on the front. And I had an aftermarket blower on the front, sort of thing. But it was nice. It was fast. It wasn't very good on gas, but it was good. 90 kilometers, like 60 or 70. Yeah. Ours is. Let's take a look at that here. Okay, 55, and then 120. Yep, our highways are 90 kilometers. Yep, and our interstates are 120. Yep, that's what they are currently. Back then, they definitely weren't that. Back then, it'd have been 55, 60, or like 80 and 100 or something like that. I don't know. But yeah.
And the red here is the worst case and the blue is the best case. We have put in the actual 2020 pH of 8.05 and then compared the two to show that ocean acidification is not only accelerating, it's tracking the worst case scenario. That's accelerating and tracking the worst case scenario. There is a 2019 paper published entitled Acceleration of Ocean Acidification in the Western North Pacific. We used two sources for the ocean pH. This is from the NOAA, the waters off Hawaii, and there is the ocean acidification in blue. The pH is 8.05, and then we took the Japan Meteorological Agency, the 2020 pH at 8.05 or less. So the 8.05 was the number we applied and compared with the RCP 8.5 worst case scenario, which we got from the IPCC's fifth assessment. And comparing the two, we found that acidification is tracking the worst case scenario. Ocean deoxygenation, we found that accelerating and tracking the worst case scenario. First, we had the IPCC's fifth assessment again. There's the historical observed record up to 2012 for that assessment, accelerating, and then with both the best case and the worst case scenario, the acceleration continues. For the deoxygenation data, the number, we used the recent IPCC's 2019 special report on oceans and cryosphere. There is the IPCC.
All right, man. Yeah, it's late for you. Yeah, go to bed. Thank you so much for stopping by. Appreciate it. Good luck on your car shopping and on the interstate and all that sort of stuff. Thanks for stopping, man. Have a great night. Get some sleep. Peace out.
Record of that, and we cut it back to focus on the present day, and clearly there you can see that the deoxygenation is tracking worse than the worst case scenario. Sea level rise, that's accelerating and tracking the worst case scenario. The fact that global sea level rise is accelerating was confirmed just this year by an article from NOAA, January the 25th, 2021, and clearly you can see that it's accelerating, and there's the quote, the rate of sea level rise is accelerating. We used the latest measurement from NASA, which is up to January 2021, and for the worst case RCP 8.5 scenario, we used the IPCC 2014 fifth assessment again. There we've cut them down to the present day and compared the two, and the accelerating sea level rise is tracking the worst case scenario. Next we come to the Arctic, and there is the accelerating Arctic temperature increase, and that's accelerating faster than the global surface temperature increase because of Arctic amplification. the feedback from the declining extent of Arctic Ocean sea ice, and you can see that around 2000 that amplification really kicks in, and the Arctic temperature increase gets higher and higher compared to the global temperature increase. This is from NOAA, from their Arctic report card of 2020. And a recent report from AMAP, the Arctic Monitoring Assessment Program, found that the Arctic temperature increase is now triple the global average. It has been double the global average, and that has increased. For the worst case scenario, we used a paper of 2020 entitled Past Perspectives of the Present Era of Abrupt Arctic Climate Change. So the main finding from this paper was that Arctic heating is abrupt. The paper was a study of Arctic decadal temperature increase. Here is the trend from 1979 to 2018. And here's the Arctic and the Arctic Ocean being in the middle there. And this is their record for RCP 8.5, the decadal trend. It certainly looks like the Arctic temperature increase is tracking the worst case scenario. Following that, we looked at Arctic sea ice. So here's the Arctic summer sea ice extent. It's been declining at an accelerating rate. So far, the projected scenarios have not diverged. For this, we used that 2019 IPCC special report on the oceans and the cryosphere. There's the original, and there's the worst case scenario, again in maroon, and the best case in blue. In light purple there is the observed recorded sea ice extent. We cut it back here and made some changes in the shading to show that it's accelerating. If it follows this accelerating trend, it will certainly be on the worst case scenario. Next is the ice sheet melting, accelerating and tracking the worst case scenario. This paper was a paper on both of the ice sheets, and the title of the paper, Ice Sheet Losses Track High-End Sea Level Rise Projections, and that's in 2020 again. The mass loss of the ice sheet is expressed in terms of sea level rise. This is from the 2019 IPCC special report. The Greenland ice sheet mass loss, we've cut it back there to the present day and emphasized from the original image. There's the historical Greenland ice sheet loss, and this is accelerating, and this is tracking above the two scenarios, the best case and the worst case, so it's tracking the worst case scenario.
By the gods.
And finally, the Antarctic ice sheet, and its mass loss is tracking the worst case scenario. This is from the same 2019 special IPCC report. We cut that down here to emphasize the historical recorded, and it's pretty similar to the Greenland ice sheet. It's just above both of the scenarios there. It's accelerating, and that means that it's certainly tracking towards the worst case scenario. In conclusion, the record high accelerating worst case scenario climate change indicator trend, if allowed to continue, and that's the point with regards to the government's current policy of pushing fossil fuel energy to the max. If this continues, it'll lead to failing carbon sinks, which has already started, multiple amplifying feedbacks, which are already operant, oceans collapse due to the combination of the ocean heating, ocean acidification, and ocean deoxygenation. And all of these together, if allowed to continue, can only end in collapse of the life-supporting biosphere. And so we really all need to be getting in touch with all of our governments and demanding that our governments stop pushing fossil fuels, because they're pushing humanity and most life on Earth off the cliff to global climate change oblivion.
Okay, so that's the short one. I'll share with you the long one as well. I need to have the links here in the text.
Hello, this is...
All right, this is the long one, and this is 50 minutes. We're not going to go through this. This one is okay. This one goes up to 720 as well. So here's the long form one. All right, so there's that video. I've been saying 200 to 300 years there'll be no life left on this planet, but with this sort of stuff here, we're looking at a 4.5 degree increase, 4.6 degree increase by 2100. So I'm definitely down to at least 100 years, 150 years, maybe 200 years if we're lucky. But yeah, these numbers show us we are radically, as a species, completely fucked. There will be no life left on this planet. Not within my lifetime. But maybe my daughter will see the horrors that the greatest horrors humanity has ever known. And our governments aren't doing anything about it. They don't care because there's no money to be made in saving humanity from extinction or doing good things. All right, so there's that. Nope, I have this backwards, don't I? No, hold on. All right, so we have another article here on 9/11. What time is it? All right, we're at 1 hour. Yeah, so let's go through this. This is always uplifting to read about the terrorism and destruction of U.S. foreign policy. It's just amazing. All right, so this is from The Nation. And this is from September 27. Not sure what that is, but September. It's from recently. September 7th. Here we go. All right. The War on Terror, 20 years of bloodshed and delusion. From the beginning, the War on Terror merged red-hot vengeance with calculated opportunism. Billions are still paying the price. Yes. Now, I'll counter this a little bit. It's not, sure, societally, it was about vengeance, but 9/11, staged, CIA and all that sort of stuff. It was all done so that we could go in and have excuse to invade the Middle East and steal all their things. We've gone over this plenty of times here. It's nothing surprising. Can I get this a little bigger? Here we go. All right, the Taliban observed the 20th anniversary of 9/11 in startling fashion. Within a week of the United States' announcement that it would withdraw its forces from Afghanistan on September 11th, the Taliban had taken over large parts of the country, and on August 15th, the capital city of Kabul fell. The speed was astonishing, the strategic acumen remarkable. A 20-year occupation rolled up in a week as the puppet armies disintegrated. The puppet president hopped in a helicopter to Uzbekistan, then a jet to the United Arab Emirates. It was a huge blow to the American empire and its underlying states. No amount of spin can cover up this debacle. Again, I disagree with this. They don't care about it. They're just gotten what profit out of it they can. Now they're moving on and leaving the country in ruins. That's what we've done historically. Little more than a year before the 9/11 attacks, Chalmers Johnson, the West Coast historian and one-time supporter of the Korean and Vietnam Wars, okay, definitely not someone we need to listen to then, and a CIA consultant to boot, published a prescient book titled Blowback: The Cost and Consequences of American Empire. The book, which was virtually ignored when first published but later became a bestseller, reads as both an eerie prologue and a searing epitaph for the past 20 years. Blowback, as Johnson warns, this is a large quote here, is shorthand for saying that a nation reaps what it sows, even if it does not fully know or understand what it has sown. Of course, given its wealth and power, the United States will be a prime recipient in the foreseeable future of all the more expectable forms of blowback, particularly terrorist attacks against Americans in and out of the armed forces anywhere on Earth, including within the United States. Okay, yep, and they don't say when this book was published. Come on, guys. 24 hours after that blowback stunned the planet on 9/11, with sympathy messages pouring in from every capital, including Havana, the recently deceased war criminal Donald Rumsfeld declared at a meeting of the National Security Council that recalcitrant states, regardless of their involvement in 9/11, should pay the price. Yes, vengeance never goes poorly. Accordingly, he suggests, why shouldn't we go against Iraq, not just Al-Qaeda, which is fucking stupid. Next day, Paul Wolfowitz, the number 2 at the Department of Defense, amplified this message by urging a broad and sustained campaign that would include ending states who sponsor terrorism. Okay, all right. Within a week, the great decider himself, George W. Bush, had green-lighted an all-out war. Let's hit them hard. We want to signal this is a change from the past. We want to cause other countries like Syria and Iran to change their view. Then the usual minions stepped in, interviewed by David Remnick for The New Yorker. Dennis Ross, the U.S. director of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, was insistent. We can't just do the usual thing. Bomb a few targets. If it turns out to be Osama bin Laden, bomb a few targets if it turns out to be Osama bin Laden. If we respond the same old way, nothing will change. Not to be outdone, the neocon Charles Krauthammer defended the invasion of Afghanistan 2 weeks later in his Washington Post column. We are fighting because the bastards killed 5,000 of our people, and if we do not kill them, then they are going to kill us again. This is a war of revengeance and deterrence. The libertarianist talk must therefore be for foreign consumption. Notably, these, quote, bastards and, quote, enemies did not include Saudi Arabia and Egypt, the 2 countries from which most of the 9/11 terrorists hailed. Now, this is just bullshit. I mean, we kind of went over this on Saturday, right, with the Zeitgeist Part 2, All the World is Stage thing. If you know, it's just convenient that their passports were found, and we know exactly that they are the ones who were the, quote, terrorists. This is such an obvious plant. It's just sickening that it's just ridiculous. It's just fucking ridiculous. So supposedly jet fuel can burn up metal, but it can't burn up fingerprints, or it can't burn up passports. It's just ridiculous. For years, wealthy Saudis had provided fertile fundraising ground for Al-Qaeda, according to none other than the 9/11 Commission report. No bias in there, right? They had, in some cases, grown up with bin Laden, whose father was a habitue of their palaces and had founded the construction firm that built some of them. During an early NSC discussion, an attack on Iraq was considered, but Bush, Rumsfeld, and Dick Cheney finally opted for a crude war of revenge against Afghanistan, where bin Laden and others in al-Qaeda's leadership were lodged courtesy of the Taliban government, which itself had been maneuvered into place by the Pakistani military with the approval of the United States in 1994, several years after the Soviet Union withdrew troops. Yeah, so something from that Zeitgeist part is that the bin Laden family had investments here in the United States, and like Cheney or somebody within the Bush government knew someone who was in charge of the investments for the bin Laden family. And actually, they were having lunch with their family as a part of investments, like right there in DC or something like that, on the day this happened. And of course, the United States trained, funded, armed the Taliban and Osama bin Laden, right? We know that from the Reagan era started in the 70s with actually Jimmy Carter and his work. The Taliban were quite prepared to hand over their guests to the United States, but they needed a fig leaf and asked politely for evidence, some proof of al-Qaeda's involvement. The White House was in no mood for legal niceties. A short delay was permitted to enable Pakistan to withdraw its military personnel from Afghanistan. Operation Enduring Freedom commenced on October 2001. The Taliban, on Pakistani military advice, mounted a paltry resistance. Their one-eyed leader, Mullah Omar, was last reported fleeing a central Afghan village on a motorbike, like Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. When U.S. troops finally reached al-Qaeda's hideout in the caves of Tora Bora, the leadership had fled. Both Omar and bin and bin Laden, plus their crews, found refuge in Pakistan, where the country's military leaders advised the Taliban to bide its time. The US and all its NATO allies, as well as Russia and China, good friends at the time, backed the war and the occupation of Afghanistan. The Russians, no doubt, with an element of schadenfreude. Okay. Here, okay, there's more. Yeah, this is kind of a fairly big article. 20 years later, the grim, bloody balance sheet of not responding the same old way speaks for itself. 6 wars, millions killed, trillions wasted, and a plague of suffering and trauma inflicted on the Muslim world, accelerating a tidal wave of refugees that has created panic in the European Union and resulted in a huge increase of votes for far-right parties, which in turn has pushed an already extreme political center further to the right. Islamophobia promoted by politicians of every stripe in the West is now embedded in Western culture. Yeah, and I talk about this a little bit in my post here. No. Socialism. Oh, come on, get back here. I'm talking about the Red Scare. So here I'm talking about how we talk about socialism, at least here in the United States, in 3 different forms. Then I'm talking about, Islam. There you go, the Muslim scare, right? So we've had the Red Scare with communism, and now it's kind of changed form as a convenient new scapegoat as the Muslim scare, right? Starting with, Iraq and Afghanistan, all that sort of stuff. So we need a new enemy to keep the wars and the coups and all that sort of stuff going, because we've had 100 years of the Red Scare, so now we need a little something different. So we'll start shifting to the Muslim scare. Oh, may no more a foreign master's rage with wrongs yet legal curse a future age, wrote Alexander Pope at the dawn of the 18th century. 300 years later, the foreign master has withdrawn its forces, admitting defeat with the full realization that the Taliban would soon be back in power. The war has been a huge political and military catastrophe for the US and its NATO camp followers. Freedom did not endure. The Taliban, which controlled 3/4 of the country on the eve of the US invasion, now control all of it. History is only modestly helpful for anticipating what happens next. After the Soviet withdrawal in 1989, a weak pro-Moscow regime managed to hold on to Kabul for some years before it was toppled with US support and replaced by warring factions of the Mujahideen. 1994, the US gave the go-ahead to a Pakistan-led Taliban intervention. 2 years later, the Taliban took over Kabul. The difference today is that there is no armed Cold War enemy as far as the US is concerned. The Taliban, once Washington's friend, key, very important, then an enemy, is now willing to be friends again. After all, the two have been talking for over a decade. Oh, they've been talking, the Taliban, oh my God, okay. Talking for a long time. Meanwhile, in July, a senior Taliban delegation visited China to pledge that Afghan soil would never again be used as a base to attack China, no doubt to discuss future trade and investment plans. Yeah, and that's something we talked about when we were talking about the fall of Afghanistan, that if the Taliban was smart, I mean, they're still going to be brutally Muslim and killing people with Sharia law and all that sort of stuff. But they could cement themselves a fairly significant legacy by engaging in smart economic policy, trading with China, trading with Russia. I mean, these are people who are going to want to trade with them, and so on. As long as they can keep that trade going and also start lifting up their infrastructure, making lives actually better for people, even as brutal and as fundamentalist as they are, they can actually win significant support from the people for making people's, lives better, at least economically, if they do not do so socially. And working with China would be one of those places to do that. Make no mistake, Beijing will replace Washington as the primary foreign influence in Afghanistan. Since China enjoys warm relations with Iran, we can hope that it will discourage rivalries between the minority Hazaras and the majority Pashtuns that might lead to bloodshed. Russia, for its part, will use its influence with other minorities to avoid the kind of civil war that broke out after the Soviet withdrawal. No outside power appears to want a repeat of that today. The US prefers to exercise direct control via drones and bombing raids, as it did a day after confirming the withdrawal from Afghanistan. To buy time for the Afghan government, we were informed, and as it did at least twice since the deadly ISIS-K airport attacks. And from what little I've seen on their drone bombings, they pretty much hit all civilians, because that's what the United States does, right? Given that the Taliban has taken up residence in the presidential palace in Kabul, what the U.S. should do, together with its NATO allies, is grant refuge and citizenship to all Afghans who want to leave the country. A tiny reparation for an unnecessary war. Apart from that, the U.S. should leave the country well alone. Real change can only come from within Afghanistan. It will take time, but it's better than an invasion by a major power. It's too early to say how this will all pan out. We'll know better in 6 months. Okay, yep. Oh, there's still more. Oh, this is different? Okay, yeah, and that's, let me go ahead and put this, pull this up. And I talk about this in my policies, U.S. Machine for War and Terrorism, much like they're talking about there. There we go. Okay, here we go. Let's go here. There we go. So yeah, if we have meddled with the country in one form or another, especially through regime change, wars, and coups, then we should automatically accept immigrants and refugees from that country since we created the problem or have exacerbated it. Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's in my policies, and that's what they're saying too above, and that's exactly right. That's what we need to. That has to be a part of the cost of war. You know, part of that cost of going to war should be, you know, funding the war. Not that we should ever be funding wars ever, because fuck wars, because they're only for profit. But fund the war. Then you need to make sure you fund the soldiers when they come back, the VA and benefits and stuff like that, and for their families, and of course, taking in the refugees from the people from the country that you are destroying. On February 15th, 2003, knowing what was next and harboring few illusions about their leaders, as many as 14 million people marched on all 7 continents against the impending war in Iraq. Sanctions had already crippled the country, leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of children, as many as 500,000 according to a 1995 Lancet analysis. Price that Madeleine Albright, fuck her, Bill Clinton's Secretary of State, had said was worth paying. Yeah, fuck her. Fuck Bill Clinton. They're all fucking war criminals. The largest demonstrations were in Rome, 2.5 million, Madrid, 1.5 million, and London, 1.5 billion, while hundreds of thousands marched in New York and Los Angeles, along with huge assemblies in most state capitals. Yeah, so what was the total for the United States? That's kind of my question. I mean, if it was less than what we see here, this can be kind of potential anecdotal evidence of, you know, the war against anti-imperialist activism that has been going on since the Vietnam War, which is the war on education. Following the Vietnam War, right, and all the protests we've had a 50-year war against education and an anti-war sentiment and that sort of a thing. The largest gathering for peace ever seen in global history was ignored by Bush, UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, and their cronies. Well, of course, because they are the ones who arranged for Iraq to be a thing. There's some cables, I think they're found in WikiLeaks, basically showing that Blair and Bush planned Iraq about 2 years ahead of time. Iraq was pulverized and its leadership subjected to a judicial lynching. Torture by U.S. soldiers, both men and women, was widespread, and triumphal rape pics were bandied about. For many, this was the face of Western civilization. Yes, this is so true. At least 500,000 Iraqis died in the war. Baghdad's museums were looted and the social infrastructure of the country was devastated by bombing raids. These were war crimes, but they were our war crimes, and so they were ignored. Disregarding the judgments at Nuremberg after the Second World War. In the war on terror, it's always open season, shoot to kill, no trials necessary, and indefinite imprisonment. Legal and moral values, our way of life, ceased to exist. Depleted uranium munitions were deployed in Iraq and later in Syria. Even before the war, of course, the United States had played fast and loose with international legal norms. The sanctions on Iraq, which were imposed in 1990, just before Bush the First Gulf War, and remained until Bush II's invasion, constituted a war crime on their own. The target was the civilian population. The goal was to incite a spontaneous popular uprising. Senior British civil servant Karen Ross testified before a parliamentary select committee in 2007 and admitted, and here's a large quote, "The weight of evidence clearly indicates that sanctions caused massive human suffering among ordinary Iraqis, particularly children. We, the US and the UK governments, were the primary engineers and offenders of sanctions and were well aware of the evidence at the time, but we largely ignored it and blamed it on the Saddam government." Don't get me wrong, Saddam was a horrible, horrible human being, and the world's, well, a better place without him overall, not including the, the invasion of Iraq. But yeah, real history moves deep within the memory of a people, but is always an obstacle to imperial fantasists. There is now near universal agreement that the Western occupation of Iraq was an unmitigated disaster. First for the people of Iraq, second for the soldiers sent by scoundrel politicians to die in a foreign land. To die for profit, right? All wars are for profit, for corporate profit, for the profit of the 1%. There's always a blood price to pay for that corporate profit. The grammar of deceit utilized by Bush, Blair, and sundry neocon neolib apologists to justify the war has lost all credibility. Despite the embedded journalists and nonstop propaganda, the bloody images refused to go away. The immediate withdrawal of all foreign troops was the only meaningful solution. While the US has supposedly withdrawn, its planes are used occasionally to bomb the country. A ghoulish reminder that if the Iraqi government misbehaves, punishments will be forthcoming. Yeah, all these guys, their asses should all be in jail for war crimes. Libya, despite its vast oil wealth, was another story, but with its own grisly ending. Unlike the leaders of the Iraqi and Syrian Ba'ath parties, Muammar Gaddafi had balked at constructing a proper social infrastructure, which would have gone a long way toward dissolving tribal loyalties. Yeah. So I'm not overly familiar with this, but when you look at the studies on inequality, right? When there's inequality and poverty and stuff like that, as we talk about in here, increases tribalism, decreases social. Actually, inequality and poverty, suffering decreases social trust, increases tribalism, right? And then increases crime and all that sort of stuff. Right, and the reason why we overthrew Gaddafi because he was going to get rid of the central bank? I think that's why that happened. And he was horrible too, but yeah, if you're smart, making sure you have a good social infrastructure in general is the way to go. And much like Germany said they want to prevent another Nazi regime from happening, so they're funding strong social infrastructure and just infrastructure in general, right? So yes, that would have been smart of Gaddafi to have done that. Make life better for people, and they'll have very little reasons, many fewer reasons to fight and kill each other. He'd given up on his nuclear program in return for Western recognition and was feted in Western capitals. His son secured his PhD at the London School of Economics, notwithstanding claims of plagiarism, after which a generous donation was promptly bestowed to the school. He also reportedly provided funds for Nicolas Sarkozy's presidential campaign in France. Yikes. All right, there you go. Is there more? Oh, there's more. Jesus. It's all these ads. This is a long-ass article. That's good stuff. Gaddafi's vices, eccentricities, and more serious failings were on display in February 2011 during an Arab Spring-linked uprising. He thought his new friends in the West would back him. The opposite was the case. They had decided to get rid of him, and the opportunity offered itself. But the story told by military humanitarians to justify U.S. intervention that Gaddafi was bent on massacring his people was based in a large part on an Al Jazeera report that the Libyan Air Force was strafing demonstrators. This turned out to be a fiction, according to congressional testimony by Defense Secretary Robert Gates and Admiral Michael Mullen. Nor were there indiscriminate large-scale massacres in the cities of Misrata, Zawiya, Ajdabaya, when government forces retook them. Gaddafi's warning on March 17 that his forces would show no mercy explicitly referred to the armed rebels in Benghazi, but he offered amnesty and an escape route to Egypt for those who laid down their weapons. Brutal though Gaddafi's regime was, there is scant evidence that NATO's bombardment prevented genocide or another Rwanda, or as President Obama put it, a massacre that would have reverberated across the region and stained the conscience of the world. Oh, you mean like the war in Iraq? Come on, you fucking tool. Unsurprisingly, there's never been a reliable accounting of civilians killed during the 6-month bombing campaign. The more conservative estimates place the collective death toll, civilians, rebels, Gaddafi's fighters, at around 8,000. But an academic from SOAS University of London, who had been advising the Foreign Office, placed the toll closer to 20 to 30,000 people. NATO's planes did not protect civilians as they targeted Gaddafi's forces. The dictator was captured, tortured, and mob lynched. Ever sensitive, Hillary Clinton remarked, "We came, we saw, he died." Pity in other circumstances, Gaddafi might have funded the Clinton Foundation. Oh, nice. Nice dig there. True dat. After the collapse of an absurdist pro-business neoliberal government led initially by a Libyan exile in Alabama, post-Gaddafi Libya was taken over by a loose coalition of Islamist militias, including those linked to Al-Qaeda. As in Iraq, the state had collapsed and a civil war commenced. Black Africans were expelled in large numbers and returned to their countries. Mali's capital, Timbuktu, and much of the Sahel were taken over by refugee militias. The French sent in troops. Meanwhile, there were more terrorist attacks in London, in Paris, in Mumbai, in Islamabad. The war on terror had failed on every level, at home as well as abroad. While the U.S. military and its allies bombed and droned their way across foreign lands, their governments were busy waging war on the civil liberties on domestic soil. Yep, from Guantanamo to the maximum security communication management units in U.S. prisons, from secret surveillance programs to Donald Trump's Muslim ban, the United States has tracked and targeted its Muslim residents. Across the ocean, Britain launched its own sprawling anti-terror regime, including a program of indefinite detention within its state security prison, Belmarsh, where at least one prisoner was driven mad and transferred to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital. Yeah, the West is just fucked in the brain. Whistleblowers who revealed the crimes in Iraq and elsewhere were severely punished. Chelsea Manning was pardoned, but Edward Snowden, who exposed the scale of surveillance carried out by the National Security Agency, NSA, had to flee the country. And Julian Assange remains in Belmarsh prison, wondering whether the British judicial system will send him to be entombed in a U.S. security prison on the basis of a dangerous precedent-setting charge of violating the Espionage Act. Snowden. So Snowden is a hero, and so is Assange. He needs to be pardoned and given a fucking Medal of Honor or some shit. 3 months after Baghdad fell in 2003, Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon gave a speech at the White House congratulating Bush on the impressive victory, but urging him not to stop. Forward to Damascus and Tehran, it must be made clear that their evil deeds cannot continue. Those two capitals remain safe, but Syria is broken and Iran sanctioned. Where will freedom and democracy strike next? Yeah, exactly right. Freedom! Okay, there it is. That is a long-ass article. All right. Questions, comments, suggestions, thoughts? Yeah, U.S. imperialism. Fuck that. What time is it? 30. All right, half an hour. How about this? We won't do this one. I have some smaller articles that we can go over that will be of interest. I don't normally do these smaller ones. Actually, Noam Chomsky is pretty long. Move that one over here. Oh yeah, this one's pretty fun. We got some kind of fun ones here to go over. I don't normally, do this sort of stuff, but it's going to be interesting. Okay, so this is, I don't know this alt facts, I don't know this website, but I've read through it and the article sounds okay. Now, if you're familiar with Texas, they passed a 6-week abortion ban. That's been all over the news over the last week or so. This is from last week, actually, September 18th. Pregnant Texas woman sues ex-boyfriend for child support. Gilead, Texas, in a case that might send reverberations throughout the Lone Star State and other red states that have passed similarly restrictive abortion bans in their state, a pregnant woman living in Texas has sued her ex-boyfriend. The woman, 27, a 27-year-old Jezebel Morales, is seeking child support, which in and of itself isn't so newsworthy. However, Morales hasn't given birth yet, which makes this story quite unique. Citing her state's new 6-week abortion ban, Ms. Morales is asking the court to award her the same kind of compensation she would be entitled to if the 11-week-old fetus in her uterus had already been carried to full term and born. Many women can't or don't know they are pregnant until after the 6th-week time frame codified by the new Texas law. Isabel just found out she was pregnant herself a couple of days ago and ordinarily would have terminated the pregnancy. Yeah, it takes, women don't typically know until about 8 weeks is when it's between 6 to 8 weeks, right around there, right? Texas informs Congress it has added Afghanistan to its name. That's pretty funny. Okay, here's her quote. Matt was a piece of shit, a total piece of shit. It's why I broke up with him. He kept writing shitty fact-check articles for that Denny Bongino guy, the one who couldn't win his congressional elections and had to become roid rage Rush Limbaugh, Isabel explained during a Skype call with us. I never, ever would have wanted to make babies with that sack of stupid, but I was thinking that giving new things a try would be good for me. Definitely learned that proto-fascism and white nationalism is not my cup of tea. I'm not sure how she had to find that out. That should go without saying, but okay. Despite knowing that she would never want to have Matt's baby, but also knowing her state doesn't give her the option of an abortion, Morales decided that she needed to protect the future of an unwanted and unplanned offspring in her womb, regardless. So I contacted the lawyer and asked if there's any provision in the law that says I can't sue Matt for child support, because the organism in my belly is so totes legit a full-fledged baby and all, Isabel said. She told me that as far as she could tell, there aren't any such restrictions, so we decided to test our legal theory and sue Matt for child support for my fetus. I wonder... Yeah, so if this does get through, the state court will overthrow it just because, they can't have this sort of a thing happening. So there you go. That's the thing. All right. So here, just something interesting I also heard about. This is from the Library of Congress. George Washington and the first mass military vaccine inoculation. All right, George Washington's military genius is undisputed, yet American independence must be partially attributed to a strategy for which history has given the infamous general little credit, his controversial medical actions. Traditionally, the Battle of Saratoga is credited with tipping the revolutionary scales, yet the health of the Continental regulars involved in battle was a product of the ambitious initiative Washington began earlier that year at Morristown, so close on the heels of the victorious Battle of Princeton. Among the Continental regulars in the American Revolution, 90% of deaths were caused by disease, and variola, the smallpox virus, was the most vicious of them all. On the 6th of January, 1777, George Washington wrote to Dr. William Shippen Jr., ordering him to inoculate all of the forces that came through Philadelphia. He explained that, quote, necessity not only authorizes but seems to require the measure, for should the disorder infect the army, we should have more to dread from it than the sword of the enemy. The urgency was real. Troops were scarce and encampments had turned into nomadic hospitals of festering disease, deterring further recruitment. Both Benedict Arnold and Benjamin Franklin, after surveying the havoc wreaked by variola, smallpox, in the Canadian campaign, expressed fears that the virus would be the enemy's ultimate downfall. At the time, the practice of infecting the individual with the less deadly form of the disease was widespread throughout Europe. Now, I wasn't aware that they knew how to do this early. I thought that they didn't. This wasn't a thing until the 1800s, so this was kind of interesting to realize. It's early, as the mid to late 1700s, that's when the vaccine thing happened. Well, it was like Louis Pasteur, right? Louis Pasteur, when... Oh yeah, 1857. Oh, okay, so is he... Okay, maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm not sure. Anyhow. At the time, the practice of... okay, read that. Let's see, at the time, the practice of infecting the individual with less deadly form of the disease was widespread throughout Europe. Most British troops were immune to variola, giving them an enormous advantage against the vulnerable colonists. Conversely, the history of inoculation in America, beginning with the efforts of the Reverend Cotton Mather in 1720, was pocked by fear of the contamination potential of the process. Okay, fair. Such fears led the Continental Congress to issue a proclamation in 1776 prohibiting surgeons of the army to inoculate. Okay, that's interesting. Anti-vax right there, right? Washington suspected the only available recourse was inoculation, yet contagion risks aside, he knew that a mass inoculation put the entire army in a precarious position should the British hear of his plans. Moreover, historians estimate that less than a quarter of the Continental Army had ever had the virus. Inoculating the remaining 3/4 and every new recruit must have seemed daunting. Yet the high prevalence of disease among the Army regulars was a significant deterrent to desperately needed recruits, and a dramatic reform was needed to allay their fears. Weighing the risks, on February 5th, 1777, Washington finally committed to the unpopular policy of mass inoculation by writing to inform Congress of his plan. Throughout February, Washington, with no precedent for the operation he was about to undertake, covertly communicated to his commanding officers orders to oversee mass inoculations of their troops in the model of Morristown in Philadelphia, Dr. Shippen's hospital. At least 11 hospitals had been constructed by year's end. Variola raged throughout the war, devastating the Native American population and slaves who had chosen to fight for the British in exchange for freedom. Yet the isolated infections that sprung up among Continental regulars during the Southern campaign failed to incapacitate a single regiment. With few surgeons, fewer medical supplies, and no experience, Washington conducted the first mass inoculation of an army at the height of a war that immeasurably transformed the international system. Defeating the British was impressive, but simultaneously taking on variola was a risky stroke of genius. So there's that. I had no idea about that. Okay, so this is from Gizmodo, which is a great site. Steve Wozniak appears to be launching a space garbage company. Space needs a burdensome and expensive deep clean, and Woz's privateer apparently wants to take care of the mess. Now, we've covered something about, not this specifically, but the Gateway Foundation was running like a crowdfunding thing to do just that. They've got several designs for, grabbing things from space. Here's the Woz. Step aside, space barons. Steve Wozniak has announced space plans. On Sunday night, Wozniak tweeted a cryptic announcement a private space company is starting up, unlike the others. That is unlike the others, right? The embedded video ad for the company Privateer deceptively resembles most other billionaires' space announcements, with platitudes like "together we'll go far" over what appears to be stock footage of space milestones. Cut to footage from a climate march and the statement, "This isn't a race," an obvious reference to the original space race of the Cold War era, and possibly a nod to stuff like Blue Origin's picking a Twitter fight with Richard Branson over who gets to call himself a real astronaut. Is there? Okay, yeah. Woz did not share any additional detail beyond the video, you can watch it below, which somewhat confusingly mingles a wildfire, clouds of smoke billowing from fossil fuel power stations, people reaching to the skies, a child in an astronaut suit, and a close-up of an iris. "Here's to taking care of what we have so the next generation can be better together," the voiceover says. The Privateer website is in stealth mode, but says more details about the company will be announced at the Amos Tech 2021 conference, which begins on Tuesday in Maui, Hawaii. It runs through the end of the week. Let me see, because we are in stealth mode. Okay, so that's pretty obvious there. All right. And okay, here. Is this the video? I don't think so. All right, we'll go back over here and we'll watch their video. All right, here we go. This sounds fairly disjointed.
Together, we'll go far. We'll look out for one another, solve problems together. This isn't a race. It isn't a competition.
It
or
is.
a game.
Capitalism.
We are not one person, one company, one nation. We are one planet.
If only.
We are explorers. We are dreamers, risk takers, engineers, and stargazers. We are human, and it's up to us to work together to do what is right and what is good. So here's to taking care of what we have so the next generation can be better together.
Okay, I like the sentiment of the video, even though it's the sentiment is good, right? We should be not competing. We should be working together, blah blah blah, and all that sort of stuff. All that sort of bullshit I talk about here, right? But obviously, we're in capitalism, and capitalism is inherently competitive, and which is the primary drive for why things are so horrible on this country, in the world, and all. You guys are fucking sick and tired of seeing it, but I'm going to share my attention. This explains why, right here, right there. That's the most important post on my blog, right there. All right. So there's that. The Woz is starting a company to try and clean up space, which is good. Otherwise, there's the Kessler syndrome, which may happen. So, like, one piece of space debris may explode or hit another thing in space, and then that'll end up hitting a whole bunch of other things, causing this cascade. Then all the things will explode in orbit, and you have this massive debris field, and nothing can get in and out. So it is an important thing to do, most definitely. All right. So that's the Woz. All right, now over here. I want to find a different article on this, but this is the one that I found initially. It's interesting here. It's from the Smithsonian magazine, Fossil Fuel Green Steel, produced for the first time. The Swedish consortium, of course, it's a fucking Nordic country, which is, to be expected. The Swedish consortium delivered the first batch of the metal made using green hydrogen to an automobile manufacturer for truck production. Okay, so they're using hydrogen. Okay, steel production. Let me see if we can get this. There we go. Get rid of that fucking sidebar. Steel production is the backbone of today's modern economy. The human-made metal is used in just about everything from bridges and buildings to cars and consumer goods. However, the process to produce steel requires considerable energy, which is typically generated by the burning of fossil fuels that produce copious carbon, contributing to the climate crisis. Now there is a green method for making the metal using a hybrid process powered by hydrogen, reports David Vetter for Forbes. A metal making company in Sweden has produced the first fossil fuel free steel in a trial process. SSAB made the metal for the Volvo Group to use for truck manufacturing. The steel was produced using hybrid hydrogen breakthrough iron making technology, which uses electricity from renewable sources to create the clean burning gas. Okay, with this process, hydrogen replaces fossil fuels both in the manufacturing of iron pellets and carbon purification process, Forbes reports. Okay, so it's basically solar to hydrogen, and then hydrogen gets the temperatures needed to melt the steel. Okay. This candle holder was the first item made using the green steel. The first fossil-free steel in the world is not only a breakthrough for Saab, it represents proof that it's possible to make the transition and significantly reduce the global carbon footprint of the steel industry. Martin Lindquist, Saab's president and CEO, tells Anmar Frangul of CNBC. Producing steel without the use of fossil fuels could be a game changer for the industry, which emits about 9% of carbon dioxide worldwide. According to the International Energy Agency, global steel production is predicted to grow 33% by 2050, reports Fortune. I'm happy to be Minister for Enterprise and Energy in a country where industry is bubbling with energy for a green reset. Ibrahim Baylan, Sweden's Minister for Business, Industry and Innovation, says at a press conference, according to Helena Soderpalm for Reuters. Saab produced the first delivery of fossil fuel-free steel in a joint venture with the government-owned utility Vattenfall and LKAB, a Swedish mining company. The green steel was made in northern Sweden at a hybrid pilot plant, which was not expected to be fully operational for another 5 years, Reuters reports. Oh, that's interesting. The goal is to deliver fossil fuel-free steel to the market and demonstrate the technology on an industrial scale as early as 2026, Saab officials say in a statement. Another Swedish company is trying to beat Saab to the punch, though. H2 Green Steel claims it will be in full production of fossil fuel-free steel at a sustainable hydrogen facility by 2024. So it'd be nice to see if they could do solar concentrators. I mean, obviously that has a small time period. Yeah, that just wouldn't be. The time period would be small enough that it wouldn't be worth the time. Now, in space, they could probably do that. Use solar concentrators and then use that to do stuff. It'd be interesting to see if that would be possible. So that's the thing. It's like sustainable energy to hydrogen, and then use that hydrogen to start doing the making steel. I don't have a whole lot of time left. All right, I don't want to read these other two articles, so I'll try and go and do this one because this one is giant, and this one is, yeah, not what I want here. Yeah, this one is giant too. All right. So, as you know, here I'm a fan of vertical farming, and it's a part of my policies. We need to do vertical farming. It is a necessity. So this is from the Salt Lake Tribune. This is from August of this year. It grows 1,500 times the food with 5% of the water. How a Utah vertical farm combats climate change. Fuck yeah, this is exactly it right here. Utah tech company believes it holds the key to solving the world's food problems while also fighting climate change on all fronts. Again, in my policies, this is what I say we should do. We should be, counties and cities and states need to be going, hey, that's some nice farmland you got there. How about you vertical farm with a bunch of it, right? So there's some of the numbers here that you can grow an equal amount of food with 10% of the land and 10% of the water. So you take that, you make an agreement, through the state or whatever, that, hey, we'll help subsidize your shift to vertical farming as long as you take, a large percent of, let's say, if you have 100 acres, we want you to take 10 acres and turn that into a 10-acre giant ass vertical farm. And then those other 90 acres, we want you to rewild. Just turn it into forest, turn it into, prairie or whatever is, appropriate for that area. And not only are you using less land, getting more green space, but you're making more food, because normally you can only grow things for, several months out of a year. Here you can grow all year round. It's so much more food with so much limited resources and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a fucking no-brainer, but it's just expensive. And if we want to shift to this to help combat climate change or just be better, to combat climate change and make the world a better place, the governments need to start fucking forking out a shitload of money to do this. Not that I'm bitching here. Okay. Before Utah's searing mega drought summer, yeah, and this is going to be something super important that we need to be doing right now, because we just watched a video talking about how we are on track for a 4.6 degree temperature change by 2100. We've already seen droughts. We're already seeing stuff on fire, right? It's going to be very soon when we're not going to have land. We're not going to have arable land left to grow things and then the mass starvation is going to start. It is going to be horrific. And this next 100 years is going to be probably the end of most life on this planet. So we need to be doing this right now, not just, and these vertical farms, it shouldn't just be one story. I mean, they should make it at least, 2 stories, or even better, make it go underground. So really do almost like 10 stories, 2 above, 3 above, 7 down, or whatever. Then on top of that, you do vertical axis wind turbines. Yeah, okay, so I talk about this in here. All right, my policies talk about this, because it's important. I'll share this. I'll find the section first, then I'll go and share it. Energy, communities, agriculture, evolution of farming. Here, I'll go ahead and share that here. Actually, do I want to do this here? No, I want to do this here. I want to go back up to energy, actually. Transportation. Combine. Here we go. Combine. Here we go. So, okay, I'll start here and I'll share this so you guys have it. Right? So, this is my policies. Combine sustainable energy types. I know this is a money thing, but again, the government could fund this, as they fucking should be. So sustainable energy types should be combined as much as possible in order to maximize energy return on land use. Using land for only one type is a waste of its full potential. As an example, a solar farm could be elevated to have vertical axis wind turbines below it, or house a hydroponic farm. The wind turbines could be used to cool the solar array as well, right? So we're talking about the vertical farm, right? A vertical farm. On top of that, you have vertical axis wind turbines. On top of that, you have solar panels, right? And then above that, you can have high altitude wind turbines as well. So you can be producing a shitload of food and a shitload of energy. And I talk about, right here. So massive multi-acre hydroponic farm, vertical axis wind turbine, solar array, right, exactly. So this is exactly what we need to be funding. This is what we need to be doing. Why aren't we doing it? Because it's fucking expensive. But this is exactly the sort of things we need to be doing right here. You take all that land, you have the most efficient use out of it, and then you rewild the rest of it. Oh, the gods. All right. Before Utah's searing mega drought summer came the winter storm of 2021. In February, tornadoes and ice storms swept across the nation, causing massive damage. Hardest hit was Texas, where millions lost power, and over 200 people died, and economic damage exceeded 195 billion. Yeah, I'm not. Agriculture saw devastated crops and livestock killed in massive numbers. Some family farmers even brought their livestock indoors to sit by the fire so they wouldn't freeze to death. It wasn't just small farmers who got hit, though. One of our clients is the owner of a big cattle ranch outside Amarillo, said Steve Lindsley, president of Growth Technologies, a sustainable agriculture startup based in Vineyard, Utah. He lost half his herd in that storm. He said he knew he had to go indoors. If I can't keep my animals healthy and safe in Texas anymore, I can't do it anywhere. Whether freak winter storms or endless heat waves, climate change is forcing agriculture to evolve. As an energy and water-intensive industry and a major producer of greenhouse gases, most climate experts agree that evolution is a necessity. Yeah, and of course, getting out of meat, getting out of animals specifically pigs and cows for food is a large part of it. What's the statistic? We've gone over this. It's like 40% of the land is used for cows, and they provide 2% of the nutrition. It's a massive fucking waste of everything. At Utah's largest dairy farm on the west side of Utah Lake, Grove Technologies wants to demonstrate that it's possible to feed a hungry planet and fight climate change. 500 acres of food on a third of an acre using 5% of the water, explains Lindsley. That's the story, but it's just the beginning. 500 acres of food on a third of an acre using 5% of the water. Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is the power and the benefit of hydroponic, aeroponic, aquaponic farming, vertical farming. It's so much more efficient, and you can get more out of it, and you can do it year-round. Growing grass on Mount Olympus. If you see 1999's The Matrix walking into Grove Technologies' Alberta, Utah facility and meeting the towers might give you deja vu. Unlike in the film, this deja vu is nothing to worry about. Yeah, we don't see the pictures here because I used the no script to get rid of this annoying scripting here. The technologies behind Grove are the twinned Olympus farms, 2-story cylinders that slowly but steadily rotate squares of wheat or barley grass through a rapid growth cycle from seed to feed in 7 days. Holy balls. At one end of the first tower, a robotic dispenser fills a new 2-foot planter square with every seed, 4 minutes with mesmerizing efficiency. That square will then slowly follow the track up the first tower where it is flooded in shallow water. Fed nutrients and builds a dense mat of root bed as it germinates. Let's go ahead and, whoops. Let's see if we can open up over here and see if we can get the images. Yeah, here we go. So here's fucking Jesus. All right. So yeah, you can kind of see it here. Fucking paywalls. Yeah, so these are the captions for the pictures there. Rotating into the second tower, it is bathed in LED grow lights, powerful enough to produce rapid growth, but so efficient they are cool to the touch. Wow. Finally, as the square of wheatgrass reaches the bottom of the second tower, it is dumped without ceremony onto a conveyor belt, which carries it on its brief journey through the indoor farm to a delivery truck. When full, the vehicle will make a half-mile journey up the dirt road where 7,500 dairy cows await the next shipment of fresh feed. Yeah, fuck that. With the system, explains Lindsley, we feed the cows fresh, nutritious grass year-round. Okay, so it's okay. So they're doing grass. Okay, that's a good thing. I mean, we shouldn't be using cows in general, but well, why don't they? Okay, so if you're gonna have cows, they need to be free range. Although for the winter, that would be useful though. We feed the cows fresh, nutritious grass year-round, grown without pesticides and minimal water and fertilizer, with no runoff to rivers and lakes. We also use the best data monitoring available to ensure we provide the right nutrition for each animal. Grove has partnered with the global information powerhouse, Amazon Web Services, on monitoring. Grove is using AWS machine learning and computer vision to improve the operational effectiveness of its tower farms by converting sensor data into meaningful insights. Awesome. Big data is super important for this sort of stuff, says AWS tech lead for agriculture, Karen Hildebrand. These insights are used to improve the nutrition and yield of every harvest. The vertical farming system is named after one of the Greek gods. It's named not after the home of the Greek gods, but after Salt Lake Valley's own Mount Olympus. Grove is proud, said Lindsley, to be a local company solving a global problem. One solution to many problems. Grove Technologies' first priority is water conservation. Its system is extremely efficient, using 5% of the water of traditional agriculture by careful application of recycling of any excess. Yet it also addresses a number of other challenges. The coronavirus pandemic has underscored the fragile nature of our food supply chain. Now, even Utahns understand what it means to walk into a grocery store and find the shelves bare. If we're sitting in a restaurant eating salads in Chicago, said Lindsley, how long did it take that produce to reach our table? At least 2 weeks. There's nothing sustainable about that. Yeah, and this is very important. This is very important. Reducing that, this will reduce waste of food significantly. The long trip, our salads romaine made from Puebla, Mexico to Chicago also has consequences beyond food security. The world consumes 340 metric tons of meat per year. Calculating just for transportation of feed to meat animals adds up to a conservative annual estimate of the equivalent of 5.2 billion metric tons of emitted greenhouse gases, roughly 1 billion more tons than are emitted by all sources across Europe in a given year. Exactly right. This is such a huge waste and such a massive contributor to greenhouse gases. It's 7 o'clock. Am I going to keep reading? Yeah, we're almost done here. All right, good. Utah has 1.1 million head of beef and dairy cows. The feed transportation for these animals produces the same estimated amount of greenhouse gas as all the vehicles in the state combined. Lindsley envisions hundreds of indoor vertical farms across the globe, dramatically shortening feed transportation trips. In Alberta, Grove's partners, the family-owned Bateman's Mosita Farms, see sustainability and economic advantages in their ties to the tech company. Working with Grove has been an absolute game changer for us, said Brad Bateman. It gives us a way to become self-sufficient. The commitment runs deep enough that the dairy is moving its milking stations from half a mile from Grove Olympus Farms to just 20 feet from its doorstep, cutting the feed transportation journey to nearly zero. Again, we need to get rid of cows as food, but this is a nice little step here. What it means for Utah. The vast majority of Utah's scarce water goes to agriculture, as it does for most of the world. Grove Technologies sees itself as offering one model for how Utah can continue to honor its farming heritage while also moving towards sustainability. This is not to say it's a magic wand. The system, at least for now, requires significant investment. Yeah, and this affordable only to very large livestock producers. Yeah, exactly. Just like what I was saying, right? This is exactly the sort of things we need to be doing, and the government needs to be funding it like a decade ago. But right now, looking at Congress, looking at the 3.5 trillion bill, which is a fucking pittance, like I say here, right? If Congress does not start at $10 trillion for a bill, they're fucking wasting our time and basically voting for human extinction, right? That 10 trillion, that they should honestly start with $20 trillion for a bill, and then maybe get down to 10 trillion, right? And they should be funding vertical farming all throughout the country. And just like I said earlier, right? Going to giving out grants to every single state, and for every single state to basically go to every single farm and say, hey, we want you to take 10% of your land, shift to vertical farming, and then rewild the rest of it. That's what needs to be done. Again, money is the biggest problem here. And if you look at something like geothermal energy, right, that's the same thing. A lot of geothermal isn't done because of most of the expense is done in drilling the initial hole, trying to find a place where the geothermal will work, getting down there. And again, if the government funded that, what does it say? from the New Human Rights Movement, for every coal plant, you can fit about 9 geothermal plants in, so you get 9 times the energy for the same amount of space. Again, so if the government funded that, we could get off coal and other fossil fuels and shift to a lot of geothermal for baseload power, which is what we need to be doing. Grove aims in its next generation of Olympus towers to dramatically boost its food yield while cutting water use to below its official 5% target. This will make it more cost effective to more agricultural producers. Much as Tesla started out by crafting high-performance sports cars that could compete with top brands and then work down to more affordable models for a broader audience, Grove hopes to become increasingly economical and more widely used with time. We don't have time! Additionally, Grove, with its no pesticides and no fertilizer and methane emissions, easily could be adopted for organic farming. It also hopes to bridge a conceptual gap in the farm-to-table movement, in which restaurants seek locally sourced foods for their menus. By bringing the feed farm to the dairy or ranch, Grove brings food closer to the consumer on a larger scale, which is a good thing. Put a lot of work into careful sourcing, said Mike Lochar, co-owner of Table X, a Salt Lake City restaurant focusing on the farm-to-table cuisine. Cool. This Grove Technologies model is not really what we are looking for as a business, but as far as it can bring us all near to eating food produced closer to home, I'm all for it. Okay, there you go. 2 hours, we made it. Any questions, comments, and suggestions here before we call this a day? Anything, my peeps? Anything? All right, guys. So I live stream on Tuesdays at 5, Thursdays at 5, and Saturdays at 3 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time. So if you haven't followed me already, please go ahead and follow me. I stream on those times, and if you see my about, you've got my blog, my policy site, Patreon, Discord, all that sort of stuff is there if you want to follow me in other places as well. Yeah, last comments. Going once, going twice. All right, everyone, have a great week. Again, I'll be streaming on Thursday at 5 p.m. Central, and we will see you guys then. Have a great night.
Just me and you, let's make up all the rules. Count to 10 and watch the stars turn blue. Watch the stars. We're all dreamers in our own way, trying to find out